I decided to title this time of discussion tonight with us simply with a question, and that is the question that I hope to answer throughout my time here talking, right? And the question is, why is Christianity true? Okay? Very simple, and it kind of like, well, you're in a church, like, there's some feedback going on, right? Uh, but it's like, you're in a church, right? What type of question is that? Doesn't seem like the right question to ask in a church. But in just a second, I'll see why this is very appropriate to ask this question and to understand why is Christianity true? Like, it's not the only religion in the world. It's not the only belief system in the world. What makes us here think that Christianity is the one true religion? Is there one true religion, or is there multiple religions that are true, or is there no religion that is true at all? Or is it even possible to know if any of it is true, right? Like, these are all great questions. So once again, why is Christianity true? That's the first question that I want to lead us into tonight. And I'm not going to keep it a mystery for you, okay? I am a youth pastor, so the answer to this question is I do believe that Christianity is true. I wouldn't be here otherwise, right? However, the fact that I am a Christian, that I am a follower of Jesus, does not make me unqualified to talk about this. Matter of fact, it's impossible to be unbiased when talking about any religious topic. It's impossible. Everybody brings their own view, whether that be an atheistic worldview, right, an agnostic, or a religious view when they're discussing the topic. It doesn't disqualify the person from talking about it, right? That will mean that anything that's ever been written about religion is pretty much useless because everybody in one way or the other has been biased. So if we can get the PowerPoint up for me tonight, and I'm going to give you the answer to the question right off the bat. Okay, why is Christianity true? And I'm going to answer the question in a very simple statement. However, just because I say this statement, it doesn't make it true, right? Like, just because I say something, like, I had to prove it. And that's what I want to do for us tonight. I want to prove, but this is my answer to this question. Christianity is true because it is the most reasonable explanation to reality. Another way to put this is because the evidence points to the fact that it is the most reasonable explanation to reality. Okay? Christianity is the most reasonable explanation to reality. What do I mean by reality? Well, reality is simply what it is, what exists, right? Like, there are things that we physically see or things that we feel through our emotions and different things like that, things that we experience. Like, this is reality. You cannot deny reality. And I believe, truly, that the evidence points to the fact that Christianity is the most reasonable explanation that we have. I think there's a big misconception that sometimes we have that Christianity or religion in general is simply just blind belief. Tradition. If you were born in this part of the world, you're more likely to believe. And this is true, right? If you were born somewhere like the Middle East, right, you're probably going to believe Islam. Or if you were born in the United States, right, you're more likely to believe in Christianity, all right, or somewhere in Latin America. And although that does play a role, it does have a factor, right, religion itself cannot just be said it is a blind belief based on tradition. And tonight I want to prove specifically that Christianity is not just this blind fairy tale with seeking to explain the reality around us, right? Maybe you've heard of the God of the Gap theory, which is simply that the primitive man had to come up with an explanation to everything that they saw around them, right? And they came up with God. Whatever they didn't understand, they said, well, this must be God, or God caused it to happen, right? And that's very true. For example, with lightning, they thought that, well, this is God who's sending lightning down, and that's how they explained it. But later on, science confirmed that there's something else behind it, right? And like that, the list goes on. But the reality is that although many of these things are true, Christianity is not something that is based on nothing. It's not something that does not have any evidence. I often hear this argument when I'm having a discussion with somebody who is either an atheist or agnostic or maybe believer in another religion, that Christianity is irrational. It's not logical. It's not a rational belief. You're basing your belief on nothing. There's no evidence to support Christianity, or there's no evidence for the existence of God. And tonight, I want to propose to you the opposite. I want to propose to you that there is indeed evidence that points to us to think that Christianity is the most reasonable explanation. And before I continue with this, I also want to be clear. My goal tonight is not to go into detail of every single argument there is for the existence of God, nor my goal will be to defute every single argument there is against Christianity and God. Okay? Some of you already complained that I talked too long. So if I were to go into detail of all of this, like, it wouldn't be enough. So know that, okay? I'm not going into detail into every single argument against Christianity or any argument that I'm going to propose as well. What I simply want you to be able to get from this tonight is challenge you just a little bit to look at Christianity maybe from a different perspective, from a different angle, okay? Greg Koukl, who's he's a doctor in philosophy, and he's written many books. He says that what he likes to do with people is simply put a little stone in their shoe, right? You know when you get a little rock in your shoe and you're just walking with it, it keeps annoying you, right? It keeps annoying you. It gets you thinking about that little rock in the shoe. Well, tonight, what I want to do is put a little stone in the rock, so to speak, right? And how you think about some of these things. And now, you might say, well, because I do recognize the majority of us here are Christians, or at least we call ourselves to be Christian. Many of you, I know that you grew up in the church. But when you look at the statistics, there is the truth that the majority of you that are here simply because your parents taught you that Christianity is true and that they taught you that going to church was the right thing. That's what statistics show us. But statistics also show us that the majority of you guys that are here, when you graduate high school, you actually end up leaving the church or leaving the faith. Now, I think the reason for that is very simple. For far too long, we've been taught to simply just believe in God, do what the Bible says, and that's it. But there hasn't been any evidence or any reasonable explanation to why we should believe in God. And that is why I'm so passionate about so much of this, right? So much of this. So, before blindly believing in Jesus and just rejecting, or blindly believing in Jesus and everything that there is in the Bible, I want to challenge you to first consider it carefully. And I'll bring it to the other side. Before outright rejecting Jesus and everything that there is in the Bible, I challenge you to carefully consider this. Okay? Carefully consider the claims of Jesus and of the Bible and of the Christian faith. Now, here's where I have an issue with this. Some people think that life is kind of like a buffet in which you can kind of like pick and choose whatever religion you want. Well, you like this, well, you go ahead and do that. That seems the most attractive to you. That seems the most logical to you. Go ahead and live your life according to it, right? When you go to a buffet, you have options. You got a soup, you got chicken, you got pork, whatever you want to eat, and you kind of pick around, right? And some people think that this is how you go about life. There's all this variety of religions out there, and you simply pick whichever one you want, whichever one seems most convenient to you. But there is a problem with that, and that is that reality actually shows you that this is not the way that life works at all. Think about it more like a multiple choice question, right? And I know that exams are coming up for a lot of you in school. But think about it as a multiple choice question. And a multiple choice question, I know there's variations to it, but for the most part, you have 4 options, and only one of them is true, right? There's only one correct answer from this multiple choice question. And picking the wrong answers has consequences, right? You pick the wrong one, it has consequences. And in the case of a test, the consequences, it would just lower your grade. But when we bring this back to reality and talking about religion, if there truly is a multiple choice and there's one true answer, then the consequence of choosing the wrong religion is way greater than simply just a lower grade in an exam, because of the implications of the teachings of these religions, right? And now you might say, well, you have no proof that life is actually like just a multiple choice. And that's where I want to lead us to our first question this morning. You see, to prove this statement or to confirm this statement that I have here, I'm going to do it by answering 4 questions. 4 questions that I believe if the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then this statement is true. If the answer to these 4 questions that I'm going to bring for us are yes, then Christianity must be true. And we're going to get into this. And now, I do want to be clear that this is not completely original to me, right? A lot of this is from Dr. Frank Turek and Norman Geisler. They wrote the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which is a book that I highly recommend reading. It's quite long, so you do have to read a lot. But I found this so helpful in my understanding of the world in general. This is why this is a topic worth talking about. Because I believe that life is not like a buffet and you can pick and choose whatever is good. And this is true for you, then it's true for you. Or this is convenient to you, then that's right for you. but it's actually more like a multiple choice question with consequences when we pick the wrong one. The reason I believe it is like a multiple choice question is because the answer to this question right here is yes. Okay? Does truth exist? I believe the answer is yes. Now, to some of you, this might be very simple. It might be common sense. But to some of you, you might disagree with me. Right? And I think in our culture today, actually, the idea that truth is relative, meaning truth changes depending on the person or your point of view in the situation, is very common. Right? Relative truth states that what's true for you might not be true for me. But I want to show you clearly, not just quoting the Bible to you, but I want to show you logically that truth must be absolute. That the idea of a relative truth is completely absurd. And mainly this comes from the law of non-contradiction. And now this is what the law of non-contradiction says. It says two statements that contradict each other cannot be both true at the same time in the same way. Okay, two statements that are contradicting each other, they cannot be both true at the same time in the same way. For example, if I have this, I'm just going to call this an object right here, and I have two people who are giving their opinion on what they think this is. Somebody says, that is a water bottle, and the other person says, that is a book. One of them is wrong and the other one is right. They cannot be both right at the same time. This contradicts or goes against the law of non-contradiction, right? And this isn't a theory, this is a law, this is proven. This is philosophy 101, right? Logic 101. If there are two things that are saying different things, they cannot be both right at the same time, okay? And that is something very simple. And this law, this statement that I have right here, right? Two statements that contradict each other cannot be true at the same time in the same way. It helps us to figure out what is false, right? Either one thing is true or the other one is false. The idea that all religions are true is simply illogical. Why? Let's take two of the largest religions in the world, for example, to prove this. Let's take Islam and let's take Hinduism. Two of the largest religions in the world. For example, the Muslims believe that there is one true God who is self-existent creator of all. This is what the Muslims believe. But the Hindus believe that there are many gods and there is no such thing as a one true God. These are two statements that are contradicting each other in the same way at the same time. Meaning, the Muslim and the Hindu cannot be both right at the same time on this specific issue. Either the Muslim is right or the Hindu is wrong, or they're both wrong. But they cannot both be right. Okay? Are we following with me so far? They're saying two different things about the same thing. One is right and one is wrong. Now, there's a possibility that they're both wrong, but it is absolutely impossible for both of them to be right. Now, this does not qualify that there are some truths found in other religions that are false. Or it doesn't disqualify the fact that there are good things, good morals, good teachings in some of these religions. But it does disqualify them as the one true religion. And there must be one. Why? Because the law of non-contradiction. Right? These religions, on the surface, they might all look very similar, but when you get down to the core of their belief, you realize that there's always contradictions between them. And if they're contradicting each other, they can't all be right at the same time. Therefore, there must be one that is true, and that will make the other ones false. This isn't an arrogant statement. Like a lot of times we hear that, right? Like whatever religion it is, oh, the Christians think they're arrogant and they're right and everybody else thinks is wrong. This isn't necessarily something arrogant, right? Or the same thing could be said of the Muslim or the Hindu or the atheist. Because everybody who believes to something, they're also saying that they don't believe to the other things around them, if they contradict what they're saying. If this is the one true religion, and there is something else that contradicts what they're saying, then that just makes the other thing false. It's not a matter of being arrogant. It's not a matter of being better than somebody else. It's just simply logic. It's common sense, right? Because a lot of people point to this that, oh, the Christians just think they're the only ones who are right. And by the way, every religion thinks they're the ones who are right in one way or the other. And it could be overwhelming. Because when you think about it, there's a lot of religions in the world. There's a lot of belief systems. We know of some of the major ones, right? But there's actually tons. There's thousands of gods out there that have been created. Now, these religions, I think it helps us to simplify it a little bit. And for the sake of simplicity, I want to divide it into two different types of religion. Monotheistic and polytheistic religions, right? Monotheistic, and you may know this already, is religions who believe in one God, that there is only one God. And polytheistic is the belief that there are many gods. And we have the biggest names of these examples. For example, in monotheism, believe in one God, you have Christianity, you have Islam, and you have Judaism. These are the three major monotheistic religions in the world. And then you have polytheistic religions. Among some of the biggest are Hinduism and Buddhism, right? And this is what we have. You have these religions that can be split up, and I know there's other categories, and other religions like animism who do not believe necessarily in a deity, but simply the objects have spirits in them, and I understand that. But for the sake of simplifying things, we can kind of divide them in some categories, although I do know there's major differences even in the religions in these categories. I just mentioned some of them. But using the law of non-contradiction right here, we can know that either the monotheistics are true or the polytheistics are true, okay? They cannot be true. There can either be only one God, or the polytheistic are right, and there is a bunch of gods. So either the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews are right, or the Hindus, the Buddhists, the animists, and all these other different religions are right. They cannot, it's either the monotheistic or the polytheistics that are right, okay? This is where we are so far. There must be one true religion. Common sense leads us to think so. And if somebody tells you all truth is relative, meaning it's not absolute, it's just depending on whatever you think, then all you simply have to ask to the person who just told you all truth is relative, all you have to ask them is that true? Okay? Is that true? And if they say yes, then they're contradicting themselves. This is what we call self-contradictory statements. It's like me saying right here and saying, I cannot speak a word in English. Okay? I just contradicted myself by literally doing the exact opposite of what I'm claiming that I'm not able to do. Okay? So, truth must be absolute. Now, this is the first question. And the answer to it so far is yes. Truth does exist. Now, the next question is a little bit harder to get into, right? Does God exist? And it seems a little bit harder at the surface level. But is anyone here familiar with Albert Einstein? My bad. Most of us, right? I hope you're familiar with him. He was a brilliant mind, and he discovered a lot. And part of this, he discovered a theory that is called what? Does anybody know? You got it, Chris. So the theory of, there you go. The theory of general relativity, right? Now this is a big discovery, a discovery that Einstein himself actually didn't want to make. He didn't like where his calculations were leading him. Now there are many aspects of this theory, but one of the most significant things is that it began to prove that the universe had a beginning, right? For example, this observation was later confirmed by a guy named Hubble, right? Last name Hubble, and then Lemaitre. I'm not too sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but interesting enough, this guy was actually a Catholic priest. And now these confirmations and observations from the discoveries led to something that you might know as the Big Bang Theory, right? And this is great. This is great stuff, right? There's a lot of discoveries that are being made. The evidence is leading people to a lot of things. Now, I have a question. You might have been familiar with the Big Bang, but have you ever asked yourself, what did scientists believe before the Big Bang was discovered? The Big Bang Theory is relatively new, right? It was in the 1900s. So have you ever asked yourself, what did scientists actually believe about the universe before the Big Bang? Does anybody know? Crickets. What scientists believe about the universe before the discovery of the Big Bang was that the universe was eternal. That the universe always existed and will always exist. That was the belief not by Christians, but simply the majority of scientists before the Big Bang. Okay, now, of course, there are exceptions. Not every single scientist believed this. But for the most part, this was the common belief, that the universe was eternal. It always existed. It had no beginning. But through discoveries like Einstein's theory, and then observations, and then in the 1960s, more observations, it continued to prove that the Big Bang Theory was actually true, at least the major elements of it. So yes, I am here at a church saying that the Big Bang does not contradict God. And I want to burst another bubble for you that science and religion can be in the same talk or same conversation, or that science disproves God. I think it's actually the opposite. Because the Big Bang came and told us what the Bible had been telling us for years. It is that the universe had a beginning. That is the biblical account of how the universe started, right? Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So I'm not saying the Bible is true just because of that, but I'm saying if the Bible is true, we would expect it to be confirmed with science, right? So the question is not so much about religion versus science, but good science versus bad science. That's the real issue. So the Big Bang Theory, among many things, it proved that the universe indeed had a beginning. And of course, they don't attribute that to the Christian God or the God of the Muslims or the Jews, but they attribute that to their own natural forces and laws, and we'll get into that in just a second. So the universe had a beginning. This is a very recent idea, but now is the most prevalent idea about the universe. Now there's these things called the first and second laws of thermodynamics. Maybe some of you have taken that in school already, maybe you haven't. But the first and second laws of thermodynamics, and I'm not going to get into too much detail of all of this, but there are also more evidence to the fact that the universe indeed had a beginning. The first law teaches us, right, that the universe has a limited amount of energy, and that energy is being used. And then the second law teaches us that the universe is headed to a point of entropy or a point of complete disorder. The universe is not getting more organized, it's actually the opposite. And this is what the first and second laws of thermodynamics teach us. Now, how does this help prove that the universe had a beginning, and why is this relevant to what we're talking about and answering this question, does God exist? Well, it's because time after time, science has been confirming through discoveries that the universe had a point in which it started. If the universe, think about it, if the universe had a limited amount of energy, and it always existed, it definitely would have ran out by energy now. Think about it. If you put your car, right, it has gas in it, and you leave it on, eventually, what's going to happen? You're going to run out of gas because you have a limited amount of fuel to keep that car going. It's the same thing with the universe. And if it had always existed, then that energy would have ran out by now. Or if the universe is headed into this point of complete disorder and it has existed in eternity past, then that point of complete disorder would have arrived already, because eternity, it's pretty hard to wrap our mind around that. So, all of science points to the fact, and this is me without using the Bible, okay? But the universe had a beginning. Now listen to this. This is the statement that I'm going to have it up here so you can follow better with me. But the guy who said the following statement, he's actually the founder of NASA Space Studies. Okay, so he's an astrophysicist, pretty qualified guy to talk about astronomy, right? And here's what he had to say. He is, by the way, he's not a Christian. He is an agnostic. Here's what he had to say. I know it's a little bit hard to read, but just follow along with me. Astronomers now find that they have painted themselves into a corner because they have proven by their own methods that the world began abruptly in an act of creation to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing in the cosmos and on the earth. And they have found that all of this happened as a product of forces they cannot hope to discover. That there are what I or anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. This is somebody he's not a Christian, right? He's not biased talking about this, but this is somebody who's simply looking at the observation, and he wrote a book about this as well. And this is what he came to conclude. All of the evidence is leading to this. Now, why is this significant? Well, because it's something that I now want to introduce you, and I know that I'm just throwing a lot of information at you, but do your best to try to process this and be like a little sponge over here. But here comes the next law, and it's the law of causality. And it states this: everything that began to exist had a beginning. Okay? Everything that began to exist had a beginning. This is very simple, and this is not, once again, I'm making it clear, this is not stuff that I'm just getting from this book and indoctrinating you and brainwashing you, okay? This is something very simple. Everything that began to exist had a beginning. Now, this is actually the first premise or the first statement of the argument that is known as the Kalam cosmological argument. Don't let the name scare you. It's very simple. Take a look at it. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. Okay, number 2, the universe had a beginning, therefore, the universe, I forgot to change the after, the universe had a cause. Okay, that's what it's supposed to say there. I changed it in my here, but not over there. So, yeah, I guess you can take a picture of it, but make sure you note that is, therefore the universe had a cause. Okay, let's walk you through it. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. That is the law of causality, okay? Now, science tells us that the universe had a beginning. Okay, so this is what we call different premises that lead to a conclusion. Okay, and logic. So everything that had a beginning had a cause. The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe had a cause. All right? The universe had a cause because it had a beginning. Now, this is significant because now the question is, okay, the universe had a beginning. It must have a cause because it began to exist, and everything that becomes to exist has a cause. But what was that cause? And that's where we get into some more debate. And this, I'm trying to take you process by process, right? And really what I'm aiming for is going from atheism to agnosticism to theism to Christianity. Okay? This is kind of the walking step here, okay? So, this is the Kalam cosmological argument. It's a very simple way of proving that the universe had a cause. I'm not saying that this cause is God. I'm not saying that yet. But we'll get to that. But from the evidence alone, and this I get it from the book that I mentioned earlier, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Take a look at this, and I also have it up here so that you can follow along. Now, I'll copy these word from the book. Let me explain what I'm about to read. What we have discovered so far is, and what we're going to see, is everything that the evidence is pointing us to think about this cause. Remember, the universe must have a cause because it had a beginning. So now, what would this cause be like? And without using the Bible, we're just looking at the evidence that we have, what could this cause possibly be? And based on what we have seen, there are certain characteristics about this cause that must be true, based on what we're seeing. And this cause must be this. Take a look at it. It must be self-existent. It must be timeless. Non-spatial, meaning it is not restricted or limited to a specific place. It's immaterial. Why? Because since the first cause created time, space, and matter, the first cause must be outside of space, time, and matter. Okay, what do I mean by that? The Big Bang also teaches us that at this single point, space, time, and matter, which is necessary for life to exist, came to exist at one time, at the same time. Space, time, and matter. Meaning that which caused space, time, and matter to exist could in itself be space, time, and matter. Does that make sense? Don't try to overthink it too much. It's actually something very simple. If space, time, and matter came to exist at this point, right, and there was space, time, and matter did not exist before, whatever caused space, time, and matter to exist must not be made of or be characterized by space, time, and matter, because that didn't exist before. So whatever caused it to happen must exist outside of time, outside of space, and outside of matter. Okay? So there is a timeless, spaceless, and immaterial thing. I'm not saying it's God yet. But this is what we have so far. Right? A self-existent, timeless, non-spatial, immaterial. And in other words, he is without limits and he is infinite. Or that thing is without limits and is infinite. It is imaginably powerful. In order to create the entire universe out of nothing, this cause must be powerful in order to create it. It is supremely intelligent. Why? Because to design the universe with such incredible precision, and it says here, we'll see more of this in the next chapter, is because I got this straight from the book. And that is in the next chapter, they talk about that. So this being, or this cause, must be intelligent. And the evidence of that is in the intelligent universe that we see around us, the complex universe that we see. So it is also personal. Why do we say this cause must be personal? Because in order to choose to convert a state of nothingness into the time, space, and material universe that we see today, this force had to have the ability to make a choice, meaning it's personal. Okay? Whatever caused it to happen needed to be something personal, because only personal things are able to choose to do something, and this being chose to do something. So, let me sum this up a little bit and simplify it down, narrow it down a bit. Okay? Whatever caused the universe to exist must be self-existent, powerful, timeless, immaterial, eternal, right? And these are all things that we're getting simply from the evidence. Why do I say eternal? Because if it had a beginning, then it also needed a cause. And that brings the big question. Well, who created God? Right? Who created God? Who created God, right? That is the big question. And it's actually not too complicated. All right? Nobody created God. And you say, well, doesn't the law of causality say that everything that began to exist must have a cause? And that's the thing. It says that everything that began to exist must have a cause. If God did not become to exist, then he doesn't need a cause. But you might say, wait, hold up, because you can say the same thing about the universe, right? You can say, well, the universe has always existed, and therefore it doesn't need a cause. It just happened. But here's the problem. Science has proven that the universe is not eternal, that the universe did begin to exist. So either something outside of the universe is eternal and always began to exist, or the universe itself always existed and is eternal. But science proves that the universe is not eternal. So that leaves something outside of the universe to have caused it to happen, and that leaves that thing to be eternal. Now, when you look at all these things, so personal, self-existent, timeless, all of these things about God, when you look at that, it sounds pretty similar to the theistic God, to the description that we see of God in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Pretty similar, right? And we see the evidence and we line it up, and the account that is given in a theistic, monotheistic religion is pretty accurate to that which we see in reality, and the evidence and what it's pointing us to. So, we're walking through there, right? We're getting there. I want to propose to you another simple argument for the existence of God. And the argument is what we call the teleological argument for the existence of God. Now, this sounds very fancy, but it's pretty much this. Every design had a designer. The universe has highly complex design. Therefore, the universe had a designer. And you might say, man, that sounds so simple. It can't be true, right? Sometimes the most profound truths are actually very simple. Everything in our universe tells us that everything that is designed was designed by something else. And the great example of this was given by, I believe he was a philosopher, but it says, imagine that you're walking through the woods. You're walking through the woods and you stumble upon what you obviously look at as a Rolex, okay? It's a watch, it's a Rolex. Not just a watch, but a Rolex. And you see this, you don't think, man, how crazy it is that the wind mixed with the water and the erosion that was happening in the rocks came together and formed this beautiful diamond Rolex, right? We don't think that because we look at the design, and based on all the experiences of every watch that we've seen that has been designed by somebody, right? And somebody probably just dropped it in the woods. Everything in our common sense teaches us that every design had a designer. Why then think that the universe, who is highly more complex than a simple watch, had no designer? It was simply a result of chance. Chance does not prove anything. Chance is just a word that we use to explain something else outside of God. Chance has never created anything. Never. And it never will. You can say that, well, with billions and billions and billions a year, eventually it will happen. No. There's no evidence for that. So, design always has a designer. The universe is a highly complex design. Ooh. Therefore, the universe had a designer. Now, take a look at this. I thought I would put it up for you because I think it's interesting to note just how many zeros are in this. If the gravitational force were altered, meaning it was changed by 0.0000000000000000001, I think I missed a couple zeros, just in case, 0.001%, our sun would not exist, and therefore, neither would we. If you just change it by this small of a percentage, it wouldn't exist. I don't know about you, but that screams out to me intelligent design, not chance. It was put there in place. I don't see any way of looking at this. And I'll get into later why, like, well, if scientists know this, why do they not believe in God? And I'll answer that question towards the end. Romans 1, 19 through 20. I'm opening up the holy book. Romans 1, verse 19. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. What? For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. Wait a minute, if God was real, he would just reveal himself to mankind. Hello, Romans 1:20. He has, and it is through creation, through the universe around us. Take a look at Psalms 19. To the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. I read this verse last Friday. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. It disconnected the slide, but I have it right here. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun. There you go, thank you. And that was the next question. The Bible teaches that creation itself shows that there is a creator. Right? God reveals himself, and this is what we call general revelation. That God reveals himself through nature to the world that exists. And that is exactly what we see. So far, to sum it up, when we look at the evidence around us and the description of God in religions like Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, we see that so far, possibly one of these three is the true religion. The evidence around supports that there is one powerful personal creator. And this disqualifies polytheistic religions. Not in a mean way, we're so mean. No, it's simply a matter of whether it's true or not. Right? It's very simple. So far we kind of narrowed it down to these three religions. Either one of these three could be true, either Islam, Christianity, or Judaism, but there could only be one that is true, or all of them could be wrong. So to answer this next question, this is the third question. So far, truth exists. So far, God exists. And now, are miracles possible? Now, why do I ask this question? Well, first of all, Frank Turek first proposed it. But second of all, there are miracles in the Bible. And people say, well, Christianity is true because miracles don't happen. And the Bible mentions miracles. Therefore, the Bible's not true. Right? And I get it. Makes sense. But here's what I want to lead us to think. If Genesis 1:1 is true, then the rest of the Bible can also be true. If in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth is true, then that brings the possibility of a God who's able to do miracles. What is miracles? Something that is out of the ordinary, that breaks the natural laws, the laws of physics, right? It breaks it. It's something supernatural, like somebody coming back from the grave. Somebody who is blind, somebody touches them, and now they're able to see. These are miracles. And we say, well, if God or if Christianity was real, it wouldn't mention all these miracles because miracles are not true. But if Genesis 1:1 is true, and I'm not saying it is, I'm saying if it is, then that creates the possibility for all the other miracles in the Bible to happen. Why? Because the first and biggest miracle already happened, and that was the creation of the universe out of nothing. Okay? That was the biggest miracle. We're living in a miracle right now. So, this brings up a great question. If miracles are real, why don't they happen today? Right? I don't see people coming back to life. Like, if this is real, then why are they not happening today? And maybe you've asked yourself that question. And here's what we have to understand what a miracle is. The main purpose of miracles in the Bible are simply to confirm a message by a messenger that they're actually coming from God. Okay, so they perform these miracles, these signs, in order to confirm what they were speaking, the message they were saying. It's not just their own ideas. It's not just some wacko going around saying all these crazy things, but this is coming from God. Because miracles are out of the ordinary. It catches people's attentions. It confirms. It's like kind of like a seal stamp on something. Right? So, for example, Moses, Noah, Jesus, the apostles, they all performed miracles, but they did it, and it was God's seal of approval over what the message that they were saying. All of them had a message to say, and it was written in the Bible. But this is the primary purpose of miracles in the Bible. And you might say, well, if miracles happen more often, then I'll believe it. But that takes away the purpose of a miracle. If they just happen every day, then there wouldn't be miracles. They would just be part of the ordinary. They will now become part of, obviously, the new natural, the nature, laws of nature. Okay? They will become something ordinary. The fact that they're so rare and that they barely happen, by the way, even in the Bible, miracles are actually very rare. They only cover a span of 2,000 years and everything that the Bible covers. And it was during the times of Moses, then Jesus, and the apostles. There was hundreds and hundreds of years in which we don't hear anything of a miracle. Why? Because they happen in order to confirm a specific message. Why don't we have them today? Because the message has already been given. The full revelation of God has been written down in what we now call the Bible. So there's no need for God to do miracles to do so. Now, this doesn't disqualify the fact that God can do miracles in the sense that we think of them, right? Like he absolutely can. If he really is all powerful as he says, and the Bible claims him to be, then he can definitely do these miracles and do all these things. But he does not commonly act this way. And I think if God were to always act through miracles and breaking out of the natural laws that we have, I think it's actually him forcing our free will. Right? Because, well, if we see all these things always happening, then simply, like, who wouldn't believe in God? And God, as we see depicted in the Bible, he wants us to have faith in him. So this is what we have. In fact, miracles in the Bible, as I was saying, they're very rare, considering most of the events in the Bible are actually just regular events that are described, historical accounts. And that leads us to the last question. So I think the fact that miracles are like, oh, they can't happen, I think if Genesis 1:1 can happen, then other miracles can happen. That includes the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which we'll get into. So, does truth exist? Yes. Does God exist? Yes. Are miracles possible? Yes. And this is the final answer, because so far, the Muslim can still be right, or the Jew can be right, or the Christian. But this is where we divide. And it's in this question. Is the New Testament historically reliable? How do we know this is actually true? How do we know that what we have here is actually from God and it hasn't been changed, or it hasn't been all sorts of things? Okay? A lot of what I see is that, I hear this statement quite often actually. The Bible has been changed over time. I've heard it so many times. But here's what that is. One other statement that is just thrown around with actually no basis to support it. It's one of those slogans that people just throw around. The Bible has been changed over time. Well, to that I have a very easy question. Do you have any historical evidence to prove that the Bible has been changed over time? The answer, no. Absolutely not. There's no evidence that shows that the Bible has been changed over time. It's actually quite the opposite. The evidence points to the fact that the Bible has not been changed over time. Now, this doesn't prove, there you go, Christianity is true, right? But at least it absolutely takes away this argument that the Bible has been changed over time, therefore we can't really trust it. Now, the Bible has never been changed over time, and you have absolutely no evidence to support that. It's just one of the other statements that is kind of thrown and has become very popular, especially among like atheists, right? Specifically atheists. Now, what is so significant about specifically the New Testament in the Bible? We know the Bible, we divide it into two parts, Old and New Testament. Now, the New Testament was written by the witnesses of the events. Okay? It was written by the witnesses of the events. And before I get into some more objections and questions about this, here's what I want to say about the witnesses to events. They had no motivation to lie about these events. You might say, well, they simply lied and made it up, like every other religion. Here's the thing. The people who wrote the New Testament, who were witnesses to this, and this is confirmed not just because the Bible said it, but also outside, they had no motivation to lie at all. They were Jews, with the exception of Luke. But there were Jews who were living ordinary lives, minding their own business. They were good with their belief in God, that Yahweh is the one true God, and that the Messiah will come one day. They were chilling, they were doing their thing, right? But the big question that you have to ask is, why were they willing to leave everything behind to not follow this crazy guy named Jesus, teaching some crazy stuff? What led them to leave everything behind for this? And you might say, well, for the same reason that anybody comes up with lies like this. For power, for money, for fame, you name it. But actually, what motivation did they truly have to lie? The answer is they had no motive. It only led to them being persecuted, imprisoned, tortured, and eventually dying. Not by natural causes, but many of them were beheaded. John was burned alive. Like, these people had absolutely no motivation to lie in a culture that was completely radical against the idea of their Yahweh, their God, their one true God in the form of a human, a detestable human, right? Like, to the Jews, this was absolutely crazy. It made no sense for them. And for this God to now be humiliated in the way that he did and be thrown in a cross and die, like, it makes no sense for a Jew to make up this story. They had no motivation for this. Also, if the witnesses of the New Testament, the writers of it, if they truly, like, were making up, and this was a lie, they were making it up, then I don't think they'll be willing to die for it. And you might say, well, people have died for false things throughout history, and that's very true. People die for wrong causes all the time. But they don't willingly die for something they know is true. They died for something they thought was true, but was actually false. Okay? They died for something thinking it was true, but it wasn't true. But if these people, the writers of the New Testament, were the ones who made up this story, they knew better than anybody else whether it was true or not. They knew it. And if it was a lie, and they began to be persecuted, thrown into jail, being beaten to the point of death, and then when they're about to cut their head off, they're going to say, no, it was all a lie, we were making it up. Right? But we don't see that happening, and that's not just what we see in the Bible, but actually it's mainly what we see sources outside of the Bible of what happened to these people. John, for example, right? The Apostle Paul, Peter, Matthew, all these people who write the New Testament. So, is it really reliable? Because a lot of people say, well, here's the thing. Everything that we know about Jesus is because the Bible tells us. Duh, of course it's going to be right. Everything that we have is from here. But the truth is, we have at least 12 sources outside of the Bible that describe a lot of the events that happen. Now, these are sources that most of them are actually from non-Christian authors. They're Jewish or Romans. And these are the writings that we have outside of this describing these events are just with 100 years of the events actually occurring. Meaning these are historians who are writing this stuff down just very close to the date that it happened. So, one of them, the most famous being Flavius Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, who was not a follower of Jesus, by the way. But here's what we learn from non-Christian sources, okay, outside of the Bible about Jesus and his time. We learn that Jesus lived. These people write about a historical person that went by the name of Jesus of Nazareth. And this is what we learn. We learn that he was Jewish, that he lived in the first third of the first century. He was born out of wedlock. Ministry intersected with John, who baptized people for repentance of sins. He's talking about John the Baptist. This is all from sources that are outside of the Bible. And we get this information from outside of the Bible. It tells us that he had a brother whose name was James, and he was martyred in 62 AD by the high priest Arbanus. It says that he worked wondrous feats, meaning he did miracles. That's what people were saying. This is what the historians are writing. This is outside of the Bible. They're saying he was doing these things that people were calling miracles. It says he gathered disciples, and one historian actually mentions 5 of these names. He had conflict with Jewish authorities. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate between 26 to 36 AD. One of the Talmudic traditions, which was a Jewish writing at the time, says that he was hung, but some early Christian writings use hung for suspension on a pole. So we've been talking early history outside of the Bible proving about a crucifixion. And like that, the list goes on of sources outside of the Bible that teach us all of this about Jesus, confirming this doesn't make the Bible true, but if the Bible were to be true, then we will expect other sources to also be consistent with what the Bible is talking about. If the Bible is the Word of God, then it can't have any errors in it. And we should expect evidence around it to support what it says. And this is actually all that we have, right? All the information we gather about Jesus from historical sources alone, they confirm what is in the Bible. Actually, early fathers in the time, they quoted the Bible so much that just from their quotings of the Bible, you can put together about 90% of the entire New Testament, just from their writings. So even if you were to destroy every copy that we have, we still have these other writings who are quoting everything from it. and not that they were destroyed. Archaeology, right? 25,000 archaeological digs related to the subject of the Bible. Not one refutes anything that is in the Bible. 25,000 archaeological digs that do nothing but confirm the Bible. And like I was saying, if the Bible is truly the Word of God, then we expect it to never be refuted or contradicted by any other legit source of evidence, like archaeology or historical documentation. And one of the biggest ones for me, and with this I want to finish, is the fulfillment of specific prophecies. Prophecy is the foretelling of a future event. And today I want to tell you a story. It's about 1947. There's these three teenagers, and they were shepherds, right? And this was by the shore of the Dead Sea. And they were walking, and they were doing their job, right? They were shepherding the sheep. And they had a rock, and they saw like this cave that was over there. And they did what any teenage boy would do with the rock and the cave, and they threw it into the cave. And what happened, and this is a real story, by the way. What happened was that the rock hit something inside the cave, and it made like a noise. And it sounded like it hit something unusual. So they finished their job, what they were doing, and they went to this cave. And what they realized is they found a bunch of jars of clay. And when they opened it, they had writings in it, right? And this eventually got passed from one person to the other, or like the property of the cave. But it reached some scholars, and they began to date the scrolls that were in there. And what they began to discover that, one, this contains almost the entire Hebrew Bible, which is the Old Testament of the Christian, right? It's the Tanakh for the Jews, the Old Testament for the Christians, but it's the same writing. So through their discoveries, they were able to pile up there about 2/3 of the entire Hebrew Bible, all of it there. And they began to date this. And when they did some dating on these scrolls, specifically what became known as the Great Scroll of Isaiah, which is the book of Isaiah in the Bible, they came to discover that it dated back to around 300 BC, 300 before Christ, the time it was written. Now, this was a copy of the original, but here's what it was a big discovery, because at the time, skeptics or atheists, and this is 1947, this is very, very recent, what they discovered, many skeptics at the time, or atheists, or just agnostics, whatever you want to, they were saying that in Isaiah, specifically in Isaiah chapter 53, and I encourage you to read it, the book of Isaiah chapter 53, there was a lot of prophecies about what would happen to the so-called Messiah of the Jews, which became known as, well, Jesus. And it goes into that. And these prophecies of what will happen with Jesus. And the prophecy was so precise to what actually happened to the historical Jesus of Nazareth that skeptics and atheists, agnostics, they began to say, the book of Isaiah was written after the events happened, after the time of Jesus. That was the common belief. That was the only explanation to the fact that these prophecies, these events occurred exactly like they were going to happen. So they said, well, this happened after. But then these three little teenage boys threw a rock into a cave, and they found the biggest archaeological find of the 20th century. And that is that the scroll of Isaiah, it dated back, this copy of it at least, to 300 years before Christ, before the events happened. And that absolutely dismantled the idea that Isaiah was written after it happened, therefore it wasn't really a prophecy. And like that, we see 300 specific prophecies about this Messiah that is coming, and all of these were fulfilled by the historical Jesus of Nazareth. What we continue to see is the evidence continues to pile up and pile up and pile up and point us to the fact that the Bible has been historically accurate. And for me, the biggest thing is simply the resurrection of Jesus. The resurrection of Jesus. If Jesus claimed to be God and simply died, he was just another crazy guy with good teachings. That's all he was. But if he truly came back to life, and if there was a way to prove that, then that changes everything, because nobody just comes back to life. Especially when he predicted that he was coming back to life. Now, I don't want to talk too much about the resurrection, because, well, Easter is coming up, and I do plan on talking about the resurrection. And that, once again, is my little advertisement to get you to come. But the resurrection of Jesus is the most significant event ever. If it's true, it is. If it's false, nonsense, doesn't matter. But because it has such significance, it's been tested quite a lot. It's been looked into quite a lot. Um, and if Jesus truly resurrected, we have an empty tomb. We have nobody with any motivation to steal the body. The bones have never been found. Jesus appears to 500 witnesses after, and that's recorded in 1 Corinthians, who has been proven as a historical accurate book, and sources outside of Jesus appearing to people after his death. Jesus resurrected. Most historians believe that the evidence for this is pretty tight. Now, I say all of this and I throw all of this at you, and you might say, well, if some of the brightest minds of our generation and before, if some of the people with the PhDs after their name, right, the letters PhD after doctor before, if these bright minds look at all this evidence, look at all this data, why don't they believe? Why do 98% of the scientists believe that God does not exist? Or that God, or the Christian God, or the theistic God is not the one who exists? Why? And it's for something very simple. And it might disappoint some of you. But it's because they do not want the moral responsibility that comes with believing in the theistic God, in the Christian God. So they find every explanation possible around this. And that is exactly what we see. And scientists himself has expressed this. Einstein himself hated his discoveries. He was frustrated, irritated at what he was finding out, because he knew what that meant. And we simply do not want a God who is our Lord, who is our master, and we can't live however I want. And that's an issue. And that's the cause. That's the real reason. So, I believe, however, that this happens because there's a misunderstanding about what Christianity is actually like. We look at Christianity as a suppression of desires and joy, and it's the most boring life ever, just following what the big guy in the sky has to say, right? But take a look at John 10:10. Oh, by the way, these are the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is Isaiah. This is just a part of it, and you can see the whole thing at the Israel Museum. If you go with us, you'll be able to go see it. I'm looking forward to doing that. But there you go. This is part of the great Isaiah scroll. It dates back to 300 BC. You can look all of this up. Just look up Dead Sea Scrolls. There will be plenty of stuff about it. But here's the thing. Take a look at the life of the words of Jesus. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. That's like this powerful being that created everything is also in an incredible way loving. And this for me is the biggest mystery of the Bible. How such a big, great, immense God can love somebody as insignificant as me to the point of becoming flesh in the person of Jesus Christ and dying for my sins, for my disobedience to him, who I am pretty much nothing. And that changes everything. No, my life is now not living in forced obedience to doing everything he says because he did this for me and now I owe it to him. No, you don't owe anything to God because you can never pay him back for it. So it's a completely changed mindset, changed perspective. And I cannot do anything but stand in awe of his goodness. That while we were still sinners, God demonstrated his love and died for you and I. That is the message of the gospel. That is the message that saves. Listen, you could hear all this information and evidence about the Bible, but God still says, without faith it is impossible to please me. And all he requires for mankind to be saved from an eternity in hell, all that it takes to be saved from an eternity from the wrath of God is for us to trust in who he is. That to me makes no sense. After all the data and research that I've read and everything that I've done, like this is the one thing that makes no sense to me. How does he love me so much? And here's the thing, he loves you just as much. And he died so that you will be able to have a relationship with him. He created you so that you have fellowship with him. And you can continue running your entire life away from God and spend it tirelessly running and ignoring him and putting up every excuse possible against who God is. He will not move. He will not move from where he is. And reality will hit you one day. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of time. And each of us here have the responsibility after hearing the truth to respond in one way or the other. What is it going to be like for you? Jesus died so that you will have life in him and life to the fullest, life abundantly. That changed my life. Changed absolutely everything about the way I live. And I find joy in being in fellowship with the creator of the universe, who is not this impersonal God who created us and told us to figure it out, but came down to where we were and became like us so that we can now have a relationship with him. And that is available to you. And that is what separates Christianity from every other religion in the world. That is not about you earning your way to God. It's not about you doing enough good deeds so that they'll outweigh your deeds. No, that's not what's going on at all. It's the God who is so kind and so gracious that is offering you a gift, and you receive it in faith. Take it or leave it, where the consequences are great. And you say, that doesn't sound fair. Being alive, honestly, isn't fair to us. It is simply a gift from God. And like I said, it's not this forceful life of I have to show gratitude to him, but it's actually quite the opposite. And you don't understand that until you received Christ. I don't expect you to have all your questions answered, nor do I believe that you have to have every single question you have answered to come to Jesus. I don't understand everything there is about a car. I don't. There's a lot of things in there that I don't understand. The same thing about a plane. Some of you know more than I. But the fact that I don't know every single little detail about how a plane works does not mean that I don't get in it. I don't have to understand everything there is about it to know that it is the most reasonable explanation to reality. And the same thing with God. Like I said in the beginning, Christianity is true because the evidence points that it is the most reasonable explanation to reality. I know I didn't answer probably all your questions, but like I said, I hope you can look at things a little bit different. And I hope you can see that Christianity is not this irrational belief. There's crazy people, right? And there are examples of bad Christians out there, of fake Christians, of people just forcing religion down your throat and changing so many things. But that does not take away that Christianity is true. Just because there are crazy Christians out there, right? There's crazy kinds of all people, of atheists, of Muslims, of Hindus. There's crazy people. You have enough of those. But that doesn't take away whether something is true or not. And don't let your experiences with Christianity, don't let what you heard from somebody else who claimed to be a Christian stain the truth and the evidence that it points to Christianity being the one true religion. And if you want to have a conversation about this, I would love to. I generally will. If you have questions, I would love to. Right? If this changed a lot for you, I want to hear it. I want to talk. If you're like, this is a waste of time, it didn't make any sense to me, I also want to hear it. Right? I want to talk. So with that, I want to close this time up in prayer. And I do want to offer and give you an opportunity to talk to God. I believe He's powerful enough, and I do believe He is powerful enough to create the universe. He is powerful enough to hear us when we pray, even when we whisper. So we do that. We talk to Him. He wants to hear from us. Also something that makes no sense to me. But He wants to hear from us. So let's go ahead and pray. Jesus, I thank you that we have this time here, and we're able to discuss some of the claims of Christianity. And I hope that if there's anybody here, God, who's not sure about who you are, you tell us that if we seek you, we will find you, God. If we search you with all our heart, we will find you. And I pray that those who are here, who might not know or simply been coming to church out of routine and this is just what I do, to really sit down and consider the claims of Christianity. Jesus, I'm so grateful for you and for who you are and the work that you're doing through this church, God, and through Christians all around the world. But God, I want to take this time to pause and give those who are sitting here an opportunity to talk to you, maybe for the first time or for the first time in a while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be silent for just about a minute. And if you want to, I'm forcing anybody. Have a time to simply talk to God. Ask Him the questions that you have. Express how you feel. And I'm going to give you a warning. You're not going to hear a big voice that's going to be answering audibly. But I want to give this time. Just you and God. Just you and God. If some of this has led you to think differently, express that to Him and ask Him to continue to show you and reveal Himself to you. Maybe tonight you decide to put your faith in Jesus and in Christ and go on a journey on what it means to follow the God of the universe, the Creator, but also the personal, kind, loving God. So I want to give you that time now.